Gaza, a name synonymous with conflict, suffering, and now, a deepening moral crisis. Recent events, marked by inflammatory statements from Israeli officials and the devastating realities on the ground, have thrust the question of Israel's moral compass into the spotlight. The recent statement by Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, suggesting that starving the 2 million residents of Gaza might be right and moral, sent shockwaves across the globe. This shocking assertion, coupled with reports of ethnic cleansing, targeted infrastructure destruction, and the withholding of essential aid, has painted a grim picture of the situation in Gaza. The world is left grappling with a deeply unsettling reality. A nation, once lauded for its resilience and moral standing, now stands accused of actions that many deem morally reprehensible. The question that echoes in the aftermath of these events is simple yet profound. Has Israel, in its pursuit of security and self-preservation, strayed from the very principles upon which its foundation was laid? The international community has responded to the recent escalation with condemnation, apprehension, and unease. Pronouncements from world leaders underscore the gravity of the situation and potential global ramifications. The United States issued a tepid rebuke, a far cry from its usual unwavering support for Israel. This hesitant response has done little to quell the growing chorus of criticism. European nations express concern over Gaza, but stop short of concrete action. This chorus of condemnation underscores the global resonance of the crisis in Gaza. The United States, long considered Israel's most steadfast ally, has found itself at the epicenter of a moral and political maelstrom in the wake of the Gaza crisis. The Biden administration faces mounting pressure to take a more forceful stance against Israel's actions in Gaza. This internal struggle underscores the delicate balancing act the U.S. must perform as it attempts to reconcile its commitment to Israel's security with its stated values of human rights and international law. The specter of the Holocaust, a defining tragedy of the 20th century, looms large over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is a historical wound that continues to shape the narratives, policies, and moral calculus of both sides. The Holocaust's legacy, while undeniably potent and deserving of remembrance, has also been wielded as a shield to deflect criticism and justify actions that many deem morally reprehensible. The Israeli government, in its efforts to garner international support and legitimize its actions, often invokes the memory of the Holocaust, portraying itself as a nation perpetually on the brink of annihilation, surrounded by enemies bent on its destruction. This narrative, while emotionally resonant, risks trivializing the horrors of the Holocaust by equating the systematic extermination of European Jewry with the complex realities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The use of the Holocaust to justify actions that result in the suffering of innocent Palestinians is particularly troubling. It creates a dangerous moral hierarchy, suggesting that the suffering of one group is inherently more significant or deserving of redress than that of another. The Holocaust, while a defining moment in Jewish history, should serve as a stark warning against the dangers of unchecked hatred, discrimination, and the dehumanization of others. Section 5. A House Divided, Jewish Voices of Dissent. Within the global Jewish community, a chorus of dissent is growing louder, challenging the narrative of unwavering support for Israel and its policies. This internal debate, often fraught with emotion and accusations of disloyalty, highlights the complex relationship between Jewish identity, the State of Israel, and the moral implications of its actions. Organizations like Jewish Voice for Peace and B'Tselem, comprised of Jewish individuals deeply critical of Israeli policies, have emerged as prominent voices, challenging the Israeli government's narrative and advocating for a more just and equitable solution to the conflict. These groups, often dismissed as fringe elements by more hawkish pro-Israel organizations, represent a growing segment of the Jewish community that refuses to reconcile their support for Israel with its treatment of the Palestinian people. This internal dissent is particularly significant as it challenges the notion of a monolithic Jewish community blindly supportive of Israel, regardless of its actions. It serves as a reminder that true allyship requires accountability and a willingness to challenge injustice, even when it emanates from those we consider our own. Section 6. Gaza, a humanitarian catastrophe unfolds. Gaza, a densely populated strip of land bordering the Mediterranean Sea, has become synonymous with human suffering. Years of conflict, political instability, and a crippling blockade have transformed this once vibrant territory into what many describe as an open-air prison, where basic necessities are scarce, and the future remains bleak. The recent escalation of violence has exacerbated an already dire humanitarian situation. The bombardment of Gaza has resulted in widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, schools, and homes, leaving thousands displaced and struggling to survive. The United Nations has described the situation as a humanitarian catastrophe, with access to clean water, food, and medical supplies severely restricted. The blockade has crippled the Gazan economy, pushing unemployment rates to staggering levels and trapping generations in a cycle of poverty and despair. Despite international condemnations, the blockade remains in place, a testament to the international community's failure to hold Israel accountable for its actions and prioritize the well-being of Palestinian civilians. Section 7. When words fail, the language of genocide. The escalating violence in Gaza, coupled with inflammatory rhetoric from some Israeli officials, has raised unsettling questions about the nature of the conflict and the potential for even greater atrocities. The word genocide, a term freighted with historical weight and moral gravity, has been uttered with increasing frequency, sparking heated debate and accusations of hyperbole. While the situation in Gaza has yet to meet the legal definition of genocide as outlined in the 1948 Genocide Convention, the dehumanizing language used by some Israeli officials, coupled with the disproportionate use of force against a largely defenseless population, has raised alarms among human rights groups and international observers. The International Criminal Court's decision to open an investigation into alleged war crimes committed by both Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups in the occupied territories, including Gaza, is a significant development. This investigation, while opposed by Israel, has the potential to shed light on the realities on the ground and hold perpetrators of atrocities accountable, regardless of their nationality or political affiliation. Section 8. The global stage, Israel's tarnished image. The conflict in Gaza has had a profound impact on Israel's standing on the global stage, tarnishing its image and jeopardizing its relationships with key allies. The once positive perception of Israel, cultivated through decades of diplomacy and public relations efforts, has been eroded by images of destruction, civilian casualties, and what many perceive as disproportionate use of force. The boycott, divestment, and sanctions or BDS movement, which advocates for economic and cultural pressure on Israel until it complies with international law and Palestinian rights, has gained traction in recent years. This movement, while controversial and often accused of anti-Semitism, has succeeded in raising awareness of the Palestinian plight and putting pressure on Israel to change its policies. The growing criticism of Israel's actions, particularly from younger generations and progressive movements, poses a significant challenge to Israel's long-term interests. A genuine commitment to peace, respect for human rights, and accountability for past wrongs will be essential if Israel hopes to repair its damaged image and secure its future as a respected member of the international community. Section 9. A reckoning deferred, the price of impunity. The ongoing conflict in Gaza, marked by its tragic human toll and the seeming intractability of the underlying issues, raises profound questions about the limits of international law, the efficacy of diplomacy, and the consequences of impunity. The failure to hold all parties accountable for their actions, coupled with the international community's inconsistent application of international law, has created a climate of impunity that perpetuates the cycle of violence and suffering. The absence of accountability emboldens both sides, allowing them to act with impunity and without fear of meaningful consequences. This, in turn, fuels a climate of resentment, mistrust, and hostility, making a just and lasting peace increasingly elusive. The international community, often paralyzed by political divisions and competing interests, has failed to provide the leadership and resolve necessary to break this cycle of violence. Until the international community summons the political will to hold all parties accountable, enforce international law, and address the root causes of the conflict, the people of Gaza and Israel will remain trapped in a cycle of violence and despair, their hopes for a just and lasting peace indefinitely deferred.